Seminar on natural remedies. And these remedies are very, very simple. And we're going to be using things that most people have in their homes. And as we begin, I'd like to begin with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we come to you as the creator of this amazing body. We come to you as the God that created this body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself. We come to you because you also gave us water, where we can use water treatments. You gave us herbs. You gave us different vegetables. And now we pray that you'll teach us and guide us as we discuss natural remedies. And we pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Now, the baseline for the natural remedies that I use is there's a little book, it's up the back, and I know it's a free book, so please feel free to take it. It's called The Ministry of Healing. And in the chapter, The Physician, the Educator, it's got the basic principles of what to do to keep the body well, and also what to do when it's not well. It says, the only hope of better things is the education of people in right principles. Let the physicians teach the people that restorative power lies not in drugs, but in nature. You see, disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that arise because of a violation of the laws of health. In case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained, unhealthful conditions changed, wrong habits corrected. Then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system. That's what we're looking at tonight, is what you can do to assist the body in the healing process. And the first thing we're going to be looking at is the humble onion. I think every home has an onion. And you can use the onion in a raw state, and you can use the onion cooked. So we'll begin by looking at how you can use the onion raw. The onion is a drawer. And about a year ago, my husband, it's probably more, I've been away for nearly a year, maybe 2 years ago, my husband bought me a new fridge, and I did not like the smell of the fridge. It smelt plastic. So what I did was I sliced an onion, and I put half of it in a bowl in the fridge, and I put the other half in the freezer. Have you ever done that? In the morning, when I took it out, did my fridge smell like onion? Well, actually, not too much, but the onion had absorbed those plasticky, it may not have been plastic, but I just didn't like the chemically smell. And then when I took them out, the fridge smelled nice, and I could start to put my food in. If you've ever painted a room and it has a strong smell, you can slice onion on plates overnight and it'll absorb all the fumes. And that's why if you only use half an onion, please don't wrap it in plastic, because it'll absorb all the chemicals out of the plastic. So if I've got big onions and I only want to use half an onion, I don't peel it, I cut it in half, and I sit it on a china plate. And you can often keep that even till the next day. If I'm going to use it a few hours later in a meal, I'll just put it on the bench. But if I want to use it the next day, I'll put a cup on top of the onion on the plate, and that'll prevent any fumes going into the fridge. So we've just established that the onion is a drawer. Have you ever chopped up an onion and you start crying and your nose start running? So the properties in the onion directly affect our respiratory. So it's very good to use for coughs and colds. So if you've got a sore throat, you can finely slice the onion. You would only need a few slices, and you get a cloth. Now this is a very good use for your old sheets that start to get tears in it. I've just been at my daughter's place. She's got 7 children. And I've been doing a lot of washing and a lot of folding. And I noticed a lot of the sheets have tears in them. They're the best sheets to tear up. And it's a good idea for every home to have a poultice box. So tear up your sheets. And this is a good size. So what are we looking at there? It's about would that be about 10 inches by 10 inches, something like that. So what you do for the onion poultice for the sore throat, you put the slices of onion here, basically like that, and then you fold this over and you fold that over, so now you have a little package that's about that big. And the area where you've got one layer of cloth between outside and the onion, that's what you put on the throat. And you wrap it around your neck, so you've just got the onion in the front part, and then you put a bit of plastic around it, and then you wrap a scarf around it. Now, ladies, your husband might not like your perfume that night, but it will bring ease to your sore throat. So that's one thing you can do for onion. Another thing you can do with the onion is for a cough. And it's excellent if someone's coughing a lot, and you will be putting the onion on the soles of the feet. The biggest pores in the whole of the body are on the soles of the feet. So what you do is you get, remember in your poultice box you've got lots of squares of these cloths, and you put the chopped onion, this is chopped onion. There's the chopped onion, and what you're going to do is put your foot on that chopped onion, pull the cloth around it, and then put your foot in a plastic bag. And then pull the plastic bag up so it fits your foot quite snug, and twist it around on itself, tuck it in and put a sock on. And you do that to the 2 feet, so that's half an onion per foot. And then you just go to bed. I was with my daughter and her little 3-year-old was coughing. He had a bit of a bad cold, cough, cough, cough. She gave him a hot bath and she put his pajamas on and put him to bed. And he coughed, and he coughed, and he coughed. And for half an hour he just coughed and coughed and coughed. We were just hoping he'd go to sleep in a minute. So I said to Emma, we better do the onion. So she got him up and we did 2 onions. We did 1 onion chopped into 2, a foot on each one, wrap the cloth round, wrap the plastic bag round, and then put the sock on. The sock just holds it into place. Put him back to bed, not 1 cough. You almost have to see it to believe it. And there were no coughing for the whole night. It's quite incredible. So it's particularly helpful when someone's got a cough. And if so yes, we could apply it to coughs, colds, pneumonias, bronchitis, asthma, and what's the one that's popular at the moment? COVID. So you can use it for all of that. Now remember Psalm 104 verse 14 that God gave herbs for the service of man. When the pores in your body take up those onion juices, it gets into the blood, and the blood knows where to take it. It's synergism it calls. The body works with these. So that's the onion poultices for the bottom of the feet. They can help to clear a head cold, but they're particularly good when someone has a cough. And now we're going to make an onion cough syrup. And this is a jar. And that's its lid. So what you'll do is you'll put half an inch of chopped onion in the bottom of this jar. And then you'll put a heaped teaspoon of honey, and then another layer of chopped onion, and then another heaped teaspoon of honey. We were having a discussion today. One lady said, I don't like it when the honey goes crystal. Well, it always does in the cold weather. So you can do this with a runny honey, you can do it with a solid crystal honey, you can do it with either. The same thing will happen. Another layer of onion, another big teaspoon of honey. So you'll do this until the jar's full. Another honey, another onion, and then a final big lump of honey. And you let that sit for 24 hours. And after 24 hours, what you'll find is that all the onion will be like this, and you'll have a have a syrup. And that syrup is very runny. And what you do is you strain the onion out, and then you're left with your cough syrup, onion cough syrup. And for an adult, they could have a teaspoon 3 times a day. For a child, maybe half a teaspoon 3 times a day. For a tiny little one, about 1 year old, maybe a quarter of a teaspoon 3 times a day. It's a very effective cough syrup. Now, a relative of the onion is the garlic. Garlic, I was reading one research paper, 6 times more potent than tetracycline. Tetracycline is quite a popular antibiotic. But if you want it to have the same effect as tetracycline, you need to take 4 raw cloves a day. Now, not everyone can handle 4 raw cloves a day. You've probably noticed I've had a little bit of a tickle in my throat, so I've been having a lot of garlic. And this is what I do. I have ideally the sourdough toast, then I put a nice teaspoon of olive oil on top, and then I crush a whole clove of garlic over that. And then I have to have a green for the next one. Then I have big lumps of avocado on top of that. And then on top of that, I have slices of tomato, and then put Celtic salt on top. Delicious. There's your antibiotic sandwich. Now the bread and the oil underneath, and the avocado and tomato on top, they just calm the garlic down because it's pretty hot. Oh, I forgot what else I put in there is cayenne pepper. It's a taste sensation. So that's one way you can have the garlic. Another way you can have it is a bowl of hot soup, and you can crush a whole clove into that bowl of soup, and that'll just take the edge off it a little bit. Or you can make a flu bomb. In fact, probably if we were being correct today, because many people want to know what to do, you could call it the COVID bomb. Or the cold bomb. The first ingredient is garlic. How much garlic? How much do you dare? So if you can handle a lot of garlic, you can do a huge big fat clove, but most people can handle 1 clove of garlic, and you either crush it, or what I'll often do is I've got a very fine grater, and you can grate it on the fine grater. The next ingredient is ginger. And how much ginger? You also finely grated. And it's usually about 1/4 teaspoon. So finely grated. And the next ingredient is eucalyptus oil. If you don't have eucalyptus oil, you can use tea tree oil. There's a definite measurement for this one, 1 drop. A lady rang me and she said, "Barbara, I can't take it." I said, "Why not?" She said, "It says on the bottle, you cannot take it by mouth." She said, you cannot take it, it's a poison. I said, "To know, people have been doing this for centuries. In Australia, you can even buy eucalyptus oil lozenges. Now, what have they got in them?" Eucalyptus oil. Now, it is toxic if you drink half a cup. So don't drink half a cup. 1 drop. Just in case you're not sure, I'll make sure that's an absolute one. And the next ingredient is cayenne pepper. How much cayenne pepper? Some people can handle a sprinkle, some people can handle 1/4 teaspoon, some people can handle 1/2 teaspoon. So I'll leave it up to you. The next 2 ingredients is lemon. If lemons are $1 a lemon, you might have a squeeze. If lemons are falling off your tree, you might well do 1 or 2. But lemon juice. And the next ingredient is 1 teaspoon of honey. Believe me, you could put 4 teaspoons of honey in there and it won't hide that. So a teaspoon of honey. And then you add half a cup of hot water. I've even had my 3-year-olds drink this. I would make it very mild for the 3-year-old. But you know what I found? That they quickly experience the relief it brings. If someone's got a stuffy nose, a sore throat, a tight chest, it brings relief, as you can imagine, because these are all heating herbs. So how often would you take it? 3 times a day. I think I mentioned this morning that my daughter's whole family got COVID about 3 months ago. And she gave them steam baths twice a day and flu bombs, sometimes twice a day, sometimes 3, for the very brave. In 3 days, they were over it. So that's the flu bomb. But you can't give that to a baby. But what you can do for a baby is you can wrap the garlic on the bottom of the feet. So to do that, I used to tear up my old sheets into little tiny strips. And you'd put, usually, depends how big the garlic is, you might put 2 or 3 very fine slices. You finely slice the garlic. You finely slice the garlic, and then you put this over that and wrap it on the bottom of their feet. The garlic must not touch the skin. If it does, it'll blister. And if you blister the skin, you can't put garlic on for a few days. But if you have a piece of cloth between the slices of garlic and their skin, you will never blister. I've done it many, many times to my children, to my grandchildren. It's interesting with a baby, you put it on a baby's feet, within half an hour you can smell it on their breath. The biggest pores in the whole of the body are on the soles of the feet, and it takes it up. My little boy James, well, he's not little anymore, he's very big now, he's very tall. But he used to get a lot of chest colds. You know, I realised later, after we'd moved, that we backed onto a swamp, so we're in a damp area. And when we moved up to the mountains, he no longer had that chest that he used to have every winter. But he used to get a congested chest. So I would slice the garlic, I'd put it in the cloth and wrap it on the bottom of his feet, put his shoes and socks on, and he'd run out to play. Every step he's taking, a bit more garlic, a bit more garlic. A bit more garlic's going in. At the end of the day, when I took his shoes and socks off, the garlic was like little bits of dried out yellow leather. No juice in it at all. So that's all gone into his body. It'll help to relieve congestion in the sinuses for a head cold, and it'll also help to release a congested chest. So that's garlic on the bottom of the feet. Now we're going to have a look at ginger. Ginger is a very powerful herb. Probably what it's best known for is nausea, so it's anti-nausea. So how would you take it if you had nausea? You could have a ginger tea. If you go to the health food shop and buy car sickness or seasickness tablets, it's all just compressed ginger, because ginger is a powerful anti-nausea herb. To make the tea, you finely grate the ginger and pour boiling water on it. I like a teaspoon of grated ginger, and I pour on about a cup of boiling water. That's quite hot, but I love it like that. If that's too hot for you, you can, and I'm talking about the heat of the ginger more than the heat of the water, you can certainly put less of the ginger in. It's also anti-inflammatory. So it can be taken by mouth. It can be taken by mouth, and that will certainly reduce inflammation somewhat. But it's probably most powerful as an anti-inflammatory put on externally. Now, before I show you how you do that, there's a few more things you can do for taking it internally for nausea. Also, if someone's very cold, it heats them up. If you have a massage in Asia, after the massage, they will always give you a ginger tea. So it can be used if someone's very cold. I'm sure in the winter months, if someone's been out working in the snow, they come in quite cold. It's a very quick way to warm someone up, is to give them ginger tea. It's also very good for low hydrochloric acid. So a little bit of hot ginger tea can be taken just before the meal, and it'll boost it. So now let's have a look at external, how you can use it externally. And externally, you use it as a poultice. So externally, as a poultice, you'd use it for joint inflammation. In a minute, we'll have a look at what you can do for tissue inflammation, but this is for joint inflammation. So remember, ginger's for joints. So it can be used for gout, arthritis. So if someone's got let's say they've got a painful knee, this is how you make the ginger poultice. Remember, you've got your 10, maybe that's a bit more than 10 by 10, but something like that. And you grate the ginger up on a very fine grater. So here are all our little bits of ginger. And you put it in about this area. And to make the poultice, I call it, you pull the north down, the south up, east and west. So now you're left with a little parcel like this. On one side has one layer of cloth, and the other side has all of these layers on it. And so you put on the area where there's just a single layer. So let's say someone's got a sore knee and we put the poultice on. And then you cover it with about this much plastic. So the cling wrap, if I use cling wrap, I fold the cling wrap over a few times to make it a little bit more substantial. Then you place it over. Now what the plastic does is if a breeze gets onto that wet poultice, it'll chill it. So it prevents chilling, and it also protects your clothes, and then you bandage it on. And I always pray for the poultices, that God would bless them. If the person has a lot of inflammation in that knee, within half an hour, it'll get very hot. And a lot of people say to me, Barbara, it's getting very, very hot. I said, that is good. All that heat is the inflammation being pulled out of the joint. Some people have said, Barbara, it's just so hot. I said, yeah, don't worry about that, but how does your joint feel? And they go, actually, I can move it. I've had a few people say that to me. So what I usually do is I advise putting the ginger poultice on about now, about 6:30 in the evening. And if by 7:30 it's just too hot and too uncomfortable, I say, just take it off. Because it's already done some work. The fact that the skin got so hot, it means it's already pulled a lot of inflammation out. And some people say, oh, it feels nice. Feels really, really nice. I say, great. So by the time the person goes to bed, they've assessed how they feel. If they're comfortable with it, they can certainly sleep with it all night. One lady saw my poultice lecture. She saw the ginger, what you can do with it. So she put it in on her knee in the morning. She took off at lunchtime and she could move her knee. She couldn't believe what a difference it made. She was so excited she put another one on. Then she took it off in the evening and had a shower, then put another one overnight, and then she emailed me concerned. She said, all the tissues are swollen and red and there's little blisters. What have I done? And I laughed. I said, you've just overdone it. You've just pulled too much inflammation out of the joint that has irritated the skin. I said, now that the skin and the tissues just around it are a little bit inflamed, now you can use the potato. And we'll look at potato in a minute. It's very cooling, very calming. She said, can I ever use the ginger again? I said, you can, but you might have to wait a week. Wait until that skin has settled right down. So don't overdo it. You might do it once a day, say for a couple of hours in the afternoon, because as we go through this, you'll see that there are other poultices that you can use. And sometimes people will alternate the poultices, because every poultice does a slightly different thing. One man told me that he had gout in his big toe, so he put the ginger poultice on. He said it got really hot. He said, and the next day there was no pain in that big toe, but the next toe was painful. So he put it on the next toe. Same thing. The next day, the next one was painful. I said, I hope it didn't jump to the other foot. You just keep doing it until the body gets relief. So ginger is for joint. Very good for lower back pain. How many people with lower back pain put a hot water bottle on it? And it does bring a little relief, because when you're in pain, the muscles cramp is almost a reaction to the pain. And so a hot water bottle does relieve it because you're relaxing those tight muscles. But if you've got an inflamed lower back and you put a hot water bottle on, it can increase the inflammation. But if you apply a ginger poultice, it'll start to get quite hot, pulling the inflammation out, and the heat of that poultice relaxes those cramping muscles, so it's perfect for lower back. You can use it anywhere you've got joint inflammation. You can use the ginger poultice. So that's the ginger poultice, and the ginger is used for joints. Now, I mentioned that lady who just overdid her poultice and her tissue was inflamed, that she could use potato. Potato is very cooling, potato is very soothing. There are some places you would never put a ginger poultice. You would never put a ginger poultice on the eye. Now, I think that's common sense, isn't it? But a potato poultice on the eye, very soothing. You can put potato poultice on the eye for conjunctivitis. I think you call it pink eye, is that right? You can put it on overnight. You can also put a potato poultice on the eye. I've known men who've been doing welding and their eyes get really, really red. And you put the potato poultice on sometimes just for a couple of hours and they'll get relief. The potato is very alkalizing and it's very cooling. Very cooling. So wherever you've got red, raised, angry areas, that potato poultice is very soothing for that. So if someone has sprained their ankle, the potato poultice is very good for that, because that's definitely tissue swelling there. The potato is also a drawer. I'll give you an illustration. My son William, now this is a foot. I'm not a very good drawer, but I'll try and do a reasonable foot. Okay, that's fairly reasonable. And there's the ankle bone. So when he was about 10, he was running round the edge of a swimming pool at a friend's house, and they'd landscaped it, and there are old sleepers there. Is that what you call that wood that's under the railway lines? You know, you've got... We call them sleepers in Australia. And so when they replace a railway line with new sleepers, you can buy those sleepers, and a lot of people use them for landscaping because they're great big. You know, they're about that big and about that long because they go under the tracks. So he was running round and he stubbed his foot on it. And he came to me crying, and he had a hole about there. So I looked at the hole, I got the tweezers, and I put the tweezers in as much as I dared, and I couldn't feel or find anything. I thought something must have gone in and come out. But that night I put a grated potato poultice on his foot. And in the morning, there was no swelling. There's still a bit of a hole in his foot, but he limped all day. So at the end of the day, I put another potato poultice on. And in the morning, I decided to do something else. I talked about this today. I did hot and colds. And remember, 3 minutes for hot, cold, 30 seconds. So I did a hot and cold foot bath on him 3 times. And then another grated potato poultice. 2.5 weeks later, he's still limping. And I'm doing the hot and colds morning, hot and colds night, grated potato overnight. And I just thought, you know, kids, they'll just run around, do everything, but he's limping. And a friend visited. I said, I don't know what's the matter with William's foot. He's limping. My friend said, let me have a look, William. And he did what I didn't dare do. He pushed the bottom of his foot. William screamed. My friend said, there's a lump of wood in there. He said, he'll need surgery to get that out. William looked at me a bit concerned. I said, we'll do grated potato surgery, mate. So what did I do? I did grated potato overnight, grated potato in the morning, changed it at lunchtime, grated potato. In fact, his foot looked like a dried prune. I didn't care. We're going to do full-on grated potato. After 2.5 days, a little black circle appeared on the bottom of his foot, about that big, about the size of a lentil. And I thought, what's that? This black in the hole. So what I did was I got 2 needles and put them in the side of this black thing, and I just started to pull it. And I stopped, called the family. We've been watching William limp for 2.5 weeks, or it's nearly 3 weeks now. And I said to William, you get it. And he could get his fingers on it now, and he pulled it out. It was 1 inch long. And it really was the thickness of about 2 matchsticks. Whew. Now, it wasn't like this. It wasn't like this. I think it was probably on an angle like that. But when it first happened, it must have been that far in, because remember, I put the tweezers in, but I could feel nothing. The foot was not at all swollen. It was as clean as a whistle. Now, if I'd done nothing, now an old sleeper, this sleeper was 50 years old. Can you imagine how black and dirty it was? So what the hot and colds did, and what the grated potato did, it just kept it clean. Now, what would have happened if I'd done nothing? It would have sealed, yeah? And the foot would have got bigger and bigger and bigger. So I take him to the doctor. What are they going to do, surgery? I have a friend who's a doctor. He said, we had a young man who got a bamboo spike in his heel. He said, I took him into surgery and I cut, but I couldn't find it. And a surgeon can't go cut, 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 cut. He said, I had to stitch it up and send them home. And this friend of mine, Dr. G, he's a Chinese doctor, he said, I knew about the hot and colds, so I just told the mother to do hot and colds. And eventually it came out. Possibly would have come out quicker if they'd done the grated potato. So the grated potato is a very powerful treatment. Did I do anything else? Nothing. I didn't do a thing. And this is where tetanus can get a hold on the body. Tetanus can only get a hold on the body if there's an internal wound. It's sealed or healed on the outside and it hasn't healed on the inside, and there's an element of horse organism in the soil, because you probably know horses carry tetanus. And we had a young man who was, he was a bit of a hippie. He had dreadlocks and lived in a caravan at the bottom of our property, and he was sickling the grass. You know, a sickle, those cutting the grass with a sickle with bare feet. and it went right in there. The sickle went right in there. I heard about it, and I didn't see him for 3 days. And one of the other guys came and said, "Have you seen Chris? He's lying in his bed. His foot's up like a red balloon, and there's a red line going up his leg. And he's lying in bed smoking marijuana, waiting for nature to heal." The body will heal itself. There's a little 2-letter word here. Is that right? Remember, nature is to be assisted in her efforts for the healing process. So the wound was, so this is the ankle bone. The wound was about there. So I said, "Well, bring him up." And they just about had to carry him. You see, the marijuana was dulling his pain, but his pain was telling him to do something. We must listen to that whisper, because if we don't listen to the whisper, the body starts screaming, and when the body starts screaming, damage is happening. And so what I did, I got 2 buckets, hot and cold. Remember what it does? It brings more blood. And remember what the blood contains? It contains everything that we need for healing. It contains the red blood cells, and the red blood cells contain oxygen, they contain water, they contain nutrition, everything that your body needs to heal. And the red blood cells also carry away waste. And often in an injury, the blood tends to sit and pool. And we've got our internal army, which is the white blood cells, everything we need to heal. He couldn't handle the first one very hot, that's understandable, but I knew that after he'd had the cold, he would be able to handle it a bit more hot, and he could. Because this was so serious, I decided to do it 4 times. Usually after 3 times, the body's getting a bit exhausted because it's, "Bring the blood," slowing down, "No, more blood." See, it's quite a dramatic effect on the body. So I did it 4 times, then I made the biggest grated potato poultice I'd ever made, and I surrounded his whole foot in the grated potato poultice. I covered it in plastic, and then I bandaged the whole thing up. And I asked God to please bless this potato poultice. By the end of the treatment, he had relief. If he doesn't have relief, you go straight to the hospital. Absolutely. But when you get relief, it's the body saying, "We can do this." I said, "Come back in 2 hours." He could limp now, he could walk. He could not walk before he came and did that. Remember how long does it take? 15 minutes, if that. He came back in 2 hours, and let's say the red line, was easily up to here. So when he came back, the red line was down like that. I did another hot and colds. I did another grated potato. By now it's 4 p.m. I said, "Come back in 2 hours, we'll do another one about 6, and that'll do for the night." When he came back at 6 o'clock, the red line was coming down. What's the body saying? We can do this. If the red line wasn't coming down, and if the red line was going further, you go straight to hospital. Absolutely. In the morning, when he came up to me, the red line had gone down to here, and the foot that was up like this was almost back to normal. But what was most important, which I was looking for, is this wound was oozing. See, his wound had to heal from the inside out. That was a perfect environment for tetanus to get a hold on the body. That wound must be kept open until it heals from the inside. And when it's healed from the inside, no amount of hot and colds and potato poultices is going to open it. I think we did it twice the next day, and we didn't do it again because it healed. They're powerful treatments, they're simple treatments. I had a lady ring me, it's a girlfriend of mine, she said, this is when we all had babies, and I could hear her baby screaming. I said, what's the matter with Louis? She said, his little penis is twice the size. I don't know what to do. What do you do? If you take him to hospital, what are they going to do? I said, quickly make a grated potato poultice. For a little 10-month-old baby, it was about this big. Obviously, it was about this big when we started. Remember, put the grated vegetable matter in there, pull this over, this over, this over. It's just very tidy then, because then when you've finished, you just throw the whole thing away. If you put grated potato right on the area, you've got grated potato everywhere. It's very messy. But with the poultice, the juice is coming out, and it's the juice that goes into the skin. You just want that juice. So she quickly did it. She said he stopped crying within a few minutes. Remember, the potato is very cooling, very soothing, very good on tissue inflammation. Anything that's red, raised, it'll reduce that inflammation. The little boy slept for 2 hours. What does that tell you? He's out of pain. And when he woke up, he was happy. She quickly changed his nappy. Everything's back to normal. Sometimes you don't know. Maybe the little one was crawling with no nappy and maybe something bit him, or maybe a little bit of dirt got in there. You don't know. But she never had another problem again. She had a happy baby. I learned a lot of these things because we're up in the rainforest. We're an hour from the town. So they're very handy to know. Now I want to look at charcoal. If you have a sponge and it's dry and you put water with it, it absorbs the water, is that right? Well, charcoal doesn't absorb, it adsorbs. What does adsorb mean? Adsorb means is that it draws into itself and neutralises poisons. So they're using it in hospital today. If someone has an overdose, they give them charcoal, because it'll adsorb, which means it'll draw that poison into it and it'll neutralise it. Under a microscope, you'll see all these little facets. The charcoal has all these little facets, all these little surface areas, and each of those surface areas adsorbs, draws in, and neutralises poison. Traditionally, many face masks have charcoal in them. Gas masks have charcoal in them. In hospital, they use charcoal to filter the blood for dialysis. NASA uses charcoal to filter the water and the air in outer space because it adsorbs and it neutralises poisons. Knowing that it does that, it can be used internally and it can be used externally. How would you use it internally? Any cases of poison, also diarrhea and vomiting. This is a very hard word. That could be wrong. I'm used to my computer that just does it for me. In fact, it doesn't look very good. Loose, runny stools, there we are. Can't go wrong there. A lot of people that travel to Asia before COVID hit always used to travel with charcoal tablets, so that if they happened to get barley belly, as they call it, they would take charcoal tablets. Because remember what the charcoal does, adsorbs, takes in, and it neutralises the poison. You can use it externally for any case of poisoning. So this could be bee stings, snake bites, spider bites, wasp bites. It adsorbs and neutralises the poisons. In Australia, we've got lots of spiders, we've got lots of snakes, but we've also got some pretty nasty ants, and they can give a really fire sting. But if you put the charcoal poultice on, it's it's almost within minutes the pain has gone. It's quite incredible. But when you mix charcoal with water, it's like mixing dirt with water. So how you make your charcoal poultice is you use probably equal amounts of charcoal, and you can use ground flax. When you put ground flaxseed, when you put water with ground flaxseed, it goes like a bit like jelly. Or you can use slippery elm. Now both ground flax and slippery elm in themselves are drawers, so they can actually add to the poultice. You can use whole flaxseed and water and cook it a little bit so it goes like a jelly, and then you can put the charcoal in there. Or you could use psyllium. So psyllium husks. When you put water with psyllium husk, it goes like a soft jelly too. So you can use any of those to make your poultice. Now charcoal's very messy stuff. So there is a mess-free way to make the poultice. And that is to get a snap-lock bag, just a little one, open it, and you put maybe 2 teaspoons of charcoal, a couple of teaspoons of any of these, and then you would put probably about 8 teaspoons of water. But before you put the water in, you seal it and you mix the powders together, the charcoal and any of these, and then you put your water in, seal it again, and then you massage. And eventually it'll go like a soft jelly. And then you put the bag down and you move it out so it takes up the whole bag. You might have to open it and get some air out. Then you've got something very thin, and you've got this snap-lock bag that's got a thin sheet of charcoal. And you can put that in the fridge. So now it's this big, and it's very thin. And you've got it in the fridge, and someone's got a bee sting or an ant bite. You get scissors and you cut out the area you want, cut the edge, peel the top plastic off, and just put it straight on the area. And of course that top area will have plastic on it, and you can just bind it up. Especially if you've got children in the home or you live out in the bush, it's good to have a few packets of this in your fridge. Now, because it's made with the vegetable matter, it could go mouldy, so you can keep it in the freezer where it will not go. And if someone's got a bite and you take it out of the freezer and cut it, the ice, the very cold, is very good when there's ever inflammation. So that's what you can use charcoal for. You can also use a charcoal poultice, not only for poisoning, but you can also, these are insects, we'll put insects or snakes. You can also use it for a sore eye. Remember we mentioned you can use grated potato? Well, you can also use charcoal. You might use it for congested chest, sometimes painful abdomen. You can put a charcoal poultice on there. In fact, you can't go wrong with the poultices. The only time you might go wrong is to put a grated ginger poultice on the eye, but I think that one's obvious. So what we're going to look at now is cayenne pepper. And cayenne pepper is a remarkable herb, and cayenne pepper can be used internally and externally. So internally, it can be used for heart disease. And we did look at this when we looked at heart health. What cayenne pepper does is thin the blood. So we'll write that there. It thins the blood. Cayenne pepper also dilates the capillaries. Dilates all blood vessels. And cayenne pepper even has the ability to rebuild arterial walls. So it's a remarkable herb. In the book Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss, he devotes half a page to every herb, 10 pages to cayenne pepper. He quotes 2 doctors in his article. And one doctor said it's impossible to abuse cayenne pepper. In other words, you could have half a cup a day and it won't hurt you. I'm not advising you do. I don't know anyone that does that. But it's just an illustration to show you really can't overdo it. One other doctor said it's impossible to cause a lesion. In other words, it will never cause a burn or an ulcer. In fact, it'll heal an ulcer. So even though cayenne pepper does all that, cayenne pepper will also constrict bleeding blood vessels. Now that seems like it's doing opposite things. So it constricts bleeding blood vessels. So how can it dilate capillaries and constrict bleeding blood vessels? Remember Psalm 104 verse 14? God gave herbs for the service of man. It'll come in and it'll do whatever you need it to do. So we had a Fijian doctor working with us for 2 weeks. She wanted to learn natural remedies to go back to Fiji and start implementing that in her medical practice. I was lecturing, she was in the kitchen, and as most Fijians do, barefoot, and the blender dropped. And you know, blenders have we had a glass blender, big thick glass, and she had 2 quite deep cuts on her foot. Now I've got a very skinny foot. She didn't have a skinny foot. She was fairly well padded. And in the break, I went out, she was on the back veranda, she said, look. So it was about ½ an inch long, and I would say easily 1/4 an inch, maybe a bit more deep. When I looked at them, I could see the fat globules. That's how deep it was. So I ran inside and sprinkled cayenne pepper into the wound. She was just laughing. She'd never seen anything like it. She said, cayenne pepper? And remember, it's already hurting, so it doesn't hurt much more. And then the bleeding stopped. Took a couple of minutes, but the bleeding stopped. She raised her eyebrows. She was very impressed, and then we bound it up. I said, just keep it bound up. In fact, I wouldn't change your dressing for 24 hours. And in hospitals today, you talk to nurses, they don't change the dressings very often because every time you change it, you disrupt the cells a little bit. So she bound it up, and the next day when we went to change the dressing, that cayenne pepper had pulled that wound in close. She said, I've never seen anything like it. She said, if I was at home and this happened, I would have stitched it. And she said, from my assessment as a doctor, that needed 2 layers of stitches. But the health retreat where she was at with us was 2 hours out of town. We weren't interested in that big long drive. And sometimes, in fact, the average wait in emergency today is 8 hours. So how nice that you've got so much that you can do. I've read reports of a young boy getting a poisonous snake bite. The mother knew about charcoal. She put charcoal straight on it. She even gave her child charcoal by mouth. And then they went the 2 hours into hospital. And when the doctor looked at it, he said, if you hadn't done the charcoal, this child would have died. So sometimes these simple remedies can save your life. Sometimes you may need to go to hospital. I was at Eden Valley Retreat and I was lecturing, and I saw a whole lot of activity in the background. One of the workers had come in holding his hand, so I went up, what's going on? And he had a very deep cut. And they were looking at it, and I said, what do we need to do? I said, stitched. It was very, very deep. It was about 2 inches long and a good inch thick. I said, no, we need a bit more than cayenne pepper for that one. And sometimes a bit more than cayenne pepper is needed. What if you're way out the bush and you can't even get there? Well, you'd put cayenne pepper in and you'd bind it, and it's quite possible that that would do it. But they had a doctor on campus, and it was just easy to stitch it, and so they did. What about outside? Well, we've just looked at outside for cuts. But cayenne pepper, remember this, it moves blood. And I've had some people say to me, they don't use cayenne pepper because it's a stimulant. It's a stimulant, but it's a blood stimulant. And if it's a blood stimulant, that's very good. Being a blood stimulant means it stimulates blood flow to wherever you put it. Nervous system stimulants are not good. There's your alcohol, there's your cigarettes, there's your caffeine. No, this is a blood stimulant. So if someone's got an underactive thyroid gland, they can put a Cayenne compress on it. It'll wake it up. If someone has lost feeling in their feet, peripheral neuropathy, it's one of the side effects of chemo, they can put cayenne pepper compresses on the bottom of their feet. If someone has lost feeling in their feet, don't ever do hot and colds on them. Because you put feet in hot water that has no feeling, you can damage the tissues. Never put cold feet into hot water. That can be painful and damage the tissues. So what do? Put it in warm water. And then maybe slowly build it up. So what you can do is you can do a Cayenne compress if someone has lost feeling in an area. So with a cayenne pepper compress, you would get a sheet of plastic, and then you put some kitchen paper on that, usually a double layer of kitchen paper. And this is for someone's foot that's that size. And then you lightly sprinkle little bits of oil, not much. You don't want leaking compresses, just a light smear, and then you sprinkle half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper on that. And the reason you put the oil on is that the cayenne pepper sticks to the oil. And then the foot goes on there, and then you put a sock on. And if you're a bit concerned that a bit of oil might drip out, over the sock you can put a plastic bag. And the person wears that all night. The bottom of the foot, the skin, goes straight onto that. Now if someone's got cold feet, by morning their feet are warm. And if someone has no feeling in their feet, often by morning they're feeling a little pins and needles, depending on how serious the peripheral neuropathy is, depending on how long they haven't had feeling in the bottom of their feet. They might need to do it every second night for a couple of weeks. What I have done, I visited a lady once who had peripheral neuropathy, and you do one on each foot. I made 6 of them, and then I folded them over and put them into a little plastic bag, so she had enough for the week. So you put it on just before you go to bed, put the sock on, hold it in place, put a plastic bag over if you suspect a little bit of oil might drip out. But that's why you only put a light smear of oil on. But the plastic should mostly hold it. So any part of the body that has lost feeling, you can put the cayenne compress on there. If I put it on my feet, by 4 a.m, I'll be waking up with hot feet. I don't have cold feet. You know why I don't have cold feet? I never let my feet get cold. I met a lady, she said, I've always got cold feet. And now her toes are numb. We're warm-blooded creatures, and if you've got cold feet, there's not a lot of blood going down there. I met another lady recently who's had cold feet for years. Her bones are starting to deteriorate in her feet. Because if there's no blood going in there, then the bones aren't being fed. Because what's the blood bringing with it? Oxygen, water, nutrition. That's the life of the flesh. And if you don't let life get into your feet are going to start to deteriorate. So when I get out of bed in the morning, I never put my feet on the floor, they'll get cold. I have slippers there. So the Cayenne compress can once again bring blood, thus feeling, back into those areas. The last one we're going to look at is castor oil. I never suggest castor oil be taken by mouth. It can be quite irritating to the gastrointestinal tract, but it can be used topically. And castor oil penetrates deeper than any other oil. And wherever castor oil penetrates, it can break up lumps, bumps, adhesions. Castor oil can break up a bone spur. I met a girl last week, she said, I used it on my bone spur and it's gone. If the bone spur's been there 3 years, it might take 3 months. If the bone spur's been there 3 months, it might take 3 weeks. If the bone spur's been there 3 weeks, it might only take 3 days. And this is how you make the compress. I'm going to show you sideways. So here is a sheet of plastic. And now we're going to do several layers, maybe even 3 or 4 layers. It might be a cotton cloth or it might be some toweling cloth. So you've got a nice thick wad there. The thicker the compress, the more castor oil it can take, and then the more castor oil can go into you. And then you put the castor oil on top. And this is about how much oil you'll put on. And then you let it sit on the bench because it's going to take 20 minutes for that oil to soak through. Now it looks like a big thick compress, and I've only done it that way to give you an illustration of how many layers. But if that's the plastic, the compress usually is about that thick. But in that you'll have many layers. So after about 10 minutes, that castor oil has moved out about this far, and it's moved down in here. And then you will apply that to the area. So where would you apply castor oil? Wherever there's a bone spur, wherever there's a tumour. I met a lady that told me she was diagnosed with breast cancer 20 years ago. She was in the hospital. She didn't like what they were offering, and a delivery boy came in and she said, "Can I get a lift out with you?" She got out of the hospital. She stayed at a little beach house that a friend owned, and she said she heard about castor oil compresses, and she said, "I just wore it 24/7, morning and night." And she got a cotton bra that was not too tight and it held it in place. She said, "I walked along the beach every day." In fact, when she told me her story, she was doing those 8 laws of health. She said, "I also every day asked God to tell me if there was any resentment in my heart, anyone I had to forgive." She said that was 20 years ago. She said, I haven't got breast cancer. Now, she didn't know very much, but she just did what she knew. But the castor oil penetrates deep. I had a lady doctor ring me. She said, "Barbara, I've just found out I've got breast cancer. I've got I'm going to do it in your American measurements." She had a 1/2 inch size lump in her breast. She said, "What shall I do?" I said, "Apply castor oil compresses and go on the Anna's Wild Yam Cream to balance the hormones." She booked in for our retreat 2 months later. She said to me, "I did that for a month, and then I went and had the lump cut out. And when they cut it out, the surgeon said, 'It's a real puzzle to me. Your lump was 1/2 inch, but when we cut it out, it was only 1/4 inch. So in 1 month, that castor oil had broken it down by half. She was telling the story at the retreat. And the other guest said, "Well, why did you have it cut out?" She said, "Well, I didn't know." I didn't know until it was cut out that it was actually reducing it. And we've seen many people conquer their breast cancer by applying the castor oil and balancing the hormones, and also changing the lifestyle and implementing the 8 laws of health. So anything from a tumour to a cyst to any hard lump anywhere in your body, try the castor oil. You've got nothing to lose. Consistency is the key. Now with the castor oil compress, that can be reused again and again and again, because this is just a vehicle holding the oil so it can go into you. You might find after a couple of days it's getting a little bit dry, and then you might put another maybe teaspoon of castor oil on. You'll get to know how much it needs. So the castor oil is another very powerful treatment working with the body. Remember, in case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained, wrong habits corrected, unhealthful conditions changed. Then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system. So I trust you've been encouraged by these simple natural treatments. And I'd like to say goodbye. I must go because I have a very early morning flight. And so I've got a car out the front, which I will be in the next 5 minutes. And I'm going to hand over it to my friend Rhonda, and she will close with prayer. And I just want to thank you for being a fantastic, attentive audience. Thank you. Thank you.
Wasn't she? We thank you so much for coming to Sandpoint, Barbara, and we hope to see you again. Will you bow your heads with me for prayer? Heavenly Father, we praise you for this day, for the beauties that we experienced, for the rest and the peace and the healing from you. We thank you for Sabbath, but we thank you this week for Barbara and all the amazing things we've learned about our body, which only makes us want to love and praise you more. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for these simple remedies that we've learned about tonight. We pray now that you will give us willing hearts to make that U-turn in our life, to start implementing these things, to change the way we do things so we don't sin against you and harm who you are. Thank you, Jesus, for loving us, for being so patient with us as we learn. Go with us now as we put these things to practice. In Jesus' name, amen.